sorry. Like, I don't know what to tell you.
Jeez. Oh, you rented a vehicle, did you?
Oh yeah, yeah. Because my Jeep, the sport clutch I bought, it turns out that manufacturer kind of lies about their clutches. They say, "Oh, we're the top maker in the world." They're not. It was a crap
Oh,
clutch.
really?
Yeah, and so they're arguing to return. So my mechanic's screaming at them. So they're gonna
So
refund
you're
me.
replacing it,
Yeah,
eh?
I'm gonna get a OEM clutch and tell you can get a sport clutch this summer because those guys are just really
Oh,
bad.
that's good.
Yeah, it sucks. I really actually did like the clutch. All right, we are live. We're talking about the clutch. All right, for anybody who re-watches this before I edit it, we are talking about my Jeep clutch. Um, all right. You know what's great is as I switched tact on our radio show and the Facebook. It's on Facebook now, the radio show, and I just leave it. And all the radio shows have the highest hit count of all the material.
Really? Wow.
So, because I limit the Facebook and YouTube to specific people who receive them, so it's not
Yeah.
public, right? Like it doesn't go into public algorithms, and so our hit count
Yeah.
is really low per se, be like based on a public video, because everyone wants
Yeah.
10,000 hits, but 10,000 hits makes no sense if those 10,000 are random people from all over the world. So the system I put in place years ago was to limit the geographical delivery of these videos. So when we see 11 people, that's 11 people from these targeted 22 First Nations, right?
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah.
So,
That
so,
makes
so some
sense. Yeah.
people will be like, well, we only got like 20 hits on this video. I'm like, yeah, but that's 20 hits probably from program delivery agents. It's from the educated layman, chief counsel. Like we can say with certainty, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So what's
Exactly.
great
Which
about
is
the
good.
vegetation study is, because that's the last video show we do, we have 137 views on it. So that's
Yeah.
137 that were interested in vegetation studies and obviously the music. Like
Yes.
our plan is like, you know what I mean? Like, so yeah, that's crazy.
That's great though.
Because on
That's
the
really
radio show,
good.
we put it live on Facebook now because Facebook changed their terms of service. So um, they just take the revenue from using the music and like any hits we get. And we're not doing this for money. We're just, you know what I mean? So I'm like,
Yep.
yeah, take all the ad revenue. So we weren't able to do that before. We might have gotten our account banned before, but now we can expand.
Oh, that's great news, eh? That's fantastic news. Jeez. Well, yeah. Radio show at 2 o'clock.
Yeah. Oh, 50 seconds. Wow, that crept up quick.
Sure did, didn't it? Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Don Parkinson, and I'm a Senior Consultation Specialist with Atkins Realis. Today, we are continuing our series of live stream topics on the Northern Road Link project as it moves through the provincial environmental assessment and federal impact assessment processes. The topics we are covering parallel our project activities, so we hope these will help our viewers and listeners better understand the project and provide input along the way. I am missing my usual co-host, Jennifer, today, but so I'll be flying solo, so bear with me. And why don't we get started now? So today we're going to talk about the Species at Risk study plan that we are executing as part of the environmental and impact assessments. And this should be an interesting topic, I think, for our viewers. And let me just run through now what we're going to cover today. We're going to lead off with our usual discussion of the project, just to introduce it to any new viewers we may have. Then we're going to talk about the species at risk known or potentially present in the local study area or regional study area. We're going to talk about baseline data collection methods, both desktop and field methods. We're going to talk about the analysis of the data, both desktop and field. We're going to talk about modeling the data to help paint that picture of the way things are and provide that basis for predicting any impacts, any potential impacts of the project. And then we'll talk about how you can get in touch with us. So let's start off with just a little bit of a background on the project. The Northern Road Link project is a proposed all-season road in Northern Ontario, sitting on Treaty 9 land. It would connect the Ring of Fire mineral deposits to the all-season highway network or provincial highway network through its connection with the Martin Falls Community Access Road. And at the same time, it would provide an opportunity for Webequie First Nation to connect to the provincial highway network through its connection to the Northern Road Link. So I'll get into that a little in a minute. The Ring of Fire is considered to be one of the most promising mineral development opportunities in Ontario. This project is subject to both the Environmental Assessment Act, which is provincial, and the Impact Assessment Act, which is federal. One of the more unique aspects of this project is that its proponents are two First Nations, both remote, Martin Falls First Nation and Webequie First Nation. Both are located about 500 kilometers north of Thunder Bay in slightly different, slightly different directions. And this project came to be, this environmental assessment or impact assessment came to be after a number of uh, previous studies were undertaken, and then finally in 2020, Martin Falls First Nation and Webequie First Nation agreed to work together and subject the project to a provincial environmental assessment, and then it then became a federal impact assessment. There, as you probably know, are currently 3 all-season road projects occurring in the same area. They were initiated at different points in time for different reasons. Starting the northernmost project is the Webequie Supply Road project, which is planned to begin at Webequie Airport and run southeast to just east of the McFalls Lake, or just east of the Muckatai River, in the McFalls Lake area, where it would connect with the northern end of the Northern Road Link project. Northern Road Link would then extend south to just west of Martin Falls, where it would connect with the Martin Falls Community Access Road. And then the Martin Falls Community Access Road would extend south to connect with 2 upgraded resource roads that then ultimately connect with the provincial highway network near Nakina. And the end result of these 3 projects actually being built is such that Webequie First Nation, as I mentioned, and Martin Falls First Nation would become connected to the provincial highway network, and the Ring of Fire region would also become connected to the provincial highway network, so that the minerals um, uh, that are obtained from the Ring of Fire can go to market through use of this road. In terms of the project itself, it's more than just an all-season road. It's more than just the road itself. There are other infrastructure um, requirements. Some are temporary, some are permanent. We call this ancillary infrastructure, and these would include temporary facilities such as storage and laydown areas. Um, there would be construction camps, these would be temporary, and then more permanent facilities such as aggregate sites for some would be temporary, the aggregate sites or pits and quarries. Some would be temporary because they would be needed only during construction. Others might be required to remain open to provide material to maintain the road. And then there would be maintenance facilities and yards at various locations along the road. So there's a lot more to it than just the road itself. I should mention there are also water crossings, a number of water crossings. I'm sure you're all familiar with the study area. There's a lot of water courses, lakes, rivers, streams. There would be one major water crossing, that of the Attawapiskat River, which would be over 200 meters. In terms of alternative corridors, the project has not yet identified a preferred corridor. So right now we have a range in length of the project from 117 to 164 kilometers, depending on which combination of corridor segments are chosen. The map you see on the screen shows the different options in different sections of the road where you can choose um, different segments, and those segments, will push the route in a different direction. So once those decisions are made and a preferred corridor is identified, then the planning process continues forward from there, looking at that preferred corridor. And when I talk about corridor, what I'm talking about is a 2 kilometer wide band of land within which the road would ultimately sit. And the idea of having that a corridor as opposed to just identifying a specific location for the road, it allows, for planning purposes, it allows some flexibility in case additional information that is obtained during the process might serve as a constraint and cause the so this allows us to some sort of wiggle room, I guess, to shift the exact route of the road within that corridor. So when we talk about species at risk, we're talking about species at risk that we know are present or are potentially present in the area. So we may not have seen them, nor have who have done previous studies may have seen them, but we know that the habitat is such that it's quite likely that these species would be present. So that's how we sort of categorize these. There are a number of species at risk within the area, including wolverine and little brown myotis and northern myotis, the tricolored bat. All three of those are bats. So myotis is a different species of bat. Little brown and northern myotis are different species of bat, and then there's the tricolored bat. Of course, there are two subspecies of caribou, the boreal and the eastern migratory caribou, bald eagle, barn swallow, bank swallow, Canada warbler, chimney swift, bank tern. A lot of these are all birds. Common nighthawk, eastern whippoorwill, eastern wood pewee, evening grosbeak, olive-sided flycatcher, peregrine falcon, rusty blackbird, short-eared owl, yellow rail, and lake sturgeon, the fish. So a lot of birds, a lot of birds. The ones that jump out probably to our viewers are lake sturgeon and caribou. perhaps also wolverine and bald eagle. So, and next we've got a couple of slides. You'll see on the screen there on the left side, we have a picture of a wolverine. This was taken for our Webquay Supply Road project. This wolverine has climbed up this wooden apparatus to reach out for some bait that's hanging from a cable between two trees. And this is part of a wolverine study that's being done as part of the environmental assessment. And the idea is to identify how many different individuals are using the area. And in this case, you can identify them by being able to look at uh, through the cameras and the way they're positioned, you can identify whether they're female or male, and we can identify individual characteristics of the animals to help identify how many individuals are using the area. And then on the right, we have a caribou. And then in our next slide, we've got a bald eagle. And then to the right, we have one of the bat species. I can't tell you which one at this point, but just to give you a flavor for some of the different species at risk, I think that's a rusty blackbird. I may be incorrect on that. And there's a lake sturgeon on the right. And then a couple of other species that I honestly can't say I know, but I just thought these slides would be interesting for everyone to look at. Let's talk a bit now about the study areas that are used for the species at risk study plan. So um, in terms of, there's three basic study areas. There's the project footprint. The project footprint is basically what's underneath everything that's associated with the project, either temporary or permanently. So basically, we're looking at a 100-meter right-of-way for the preferred route, and then the footprint of all the ancillary infrastructure, so the access roads, the pits, the quarries, the construction camps, the storage and laydown areas. So we haven't quite finalized the project footprint yet, but we have a pretty good idea of what most of it is going to be. Then we have the local study area, which varies depending on what we're talking about, whether it's caribou or wolverine or birds. So for caribou and wolverine, it's 10 kilometers beyond the boundary of the project corridor. But for birds, um, the local study area is a 3 kilometer buffer from the preferred corridor. However, for bats, the local study area is 1 kilometer from the preferred corridor. So it varies depending on the local study areas is the point. So the local study area is sort of the area where direct and indirect effects of the project are likely going to occur and affect those species at risk. And then we have the regional study area. And for caribou, this is a very large area given the nature of the animals and the range that they have. So the regional study area encompasses the entire Mississauga and Ozansky ranges for the species in Ontario, which is a very large area. And like we're talking thousands of square kilometers. And then for wolverine, the regional study area is proposed to be 75 kilometers from the wolverine local study area boundary for a total of 85 kilometers from the preferred corridor. So again, this is reflective of the range that wolverine have. Male wolverines, they have a maximum estimated home range size of over 4,000 square kilometers. So they cover very, very large areas. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about regional study areas. So the area where mainly indirect and cumulative effects of the project in the broader sort of regional context might occur. Let's talk a bit now about the baseline data collection methods, the desktop one. So what do we do when we conduct this work? Well, we look at a number of the different indigenous or academic or non-government organization and governmental studies that have been undertaken in the area, um, and that have looked at areas that include the regional study area. And these studies sort of provide information on existing species at risk and the habitat in that region. We look at available reports, we review these, we look at publicly available databases, we look at information and data from ongoing studies where we can get access to them through data sharing agreements because they're very helpful. We conduct habitat classification exercises by interpreting satellite imagery and other data sets, high resolution aerial imagery, to identify vegetation communities and map vegetation communities and natural features. And by doing that, basically what we're doing is detailing the habitat of the area, and the habitat is certainly a key component as to whether those species at risk would use those areas. So if we identify areas that are suitable for the species at risk, then these are areas likely where these species at risk could be found. We also look at government databases during this stage, and we get involved in sensitive data use agreements. So we'll work with our provincial partners and get access to sensitive data for the purposes of helping us paint the picture as to the way things are now, the existing conditions, because we need to be able to do that to identify any potential effects as part of the environmental assessment process. And then in terms of our field activities, there are a number of field activities associated with species at risk. There's the bat habitat assessments, acoustic surveys, breeding bird point counts, year-round bird acoustic surveys using acoustic recording units, which we would set up in the forest. And basically these record sounds over long periods of time, and then we take these recordings and we run them through software that's been trained basically to associate the noises or calls of different birds, for example, and it can pick out which species may be present in that area based on that analysis. Conducting targeted surveys for bank swallow, barn swallow, fish spawning surveys done in the spring, aerial distribution surveys, looking, for example, caribou, ground-based winter track surveys, looking at tracks, looking at animal tracks and identifying the wildlife using the area, the study area, game camera surveys, caribou collaring, satellite telemetry, so tracking caribou, seeing their movements over long periods of time to understand the areas that they use. Acoustic environment and disturbance studies, wolverine occupancy studies, like I talked a little bit about earlier, and then just what we call opportunistic observations of species at risk. So when our team's out in the field, if they observe something they may not have been looking for, but noting information associated with that all goes into a database, which is helpful in terms of, again, painting that picture of existing conditions. And then in terms of the analysis from the desktop, the data collected from the desktop assessments compiled onto maps, and for reference, and that helps sort of guide and helps us look at the results of field investigations. Desktop data is used to inform the studies, as I mentioned, guiding the studies, where to conduct surveys. For example, for the spawning surveys, where are the best places to conduct these surveys? So we would identify, in theory, where the best places would be based on desktop information, and then work with community members to identify their, based on their extensive knowledge, where these locations should be for the spawning surveys. And then in the field, the primary purpose of the field program is to describe the biodiversity, right? The number of species and the abundance of those species, and their habitats that are found or likely to be found in the project local study area. And these data collected are again to fulfill the requirements of the environmental assessment and to help us basically predict project effects. So we need to know what is there and the conditions of the existing conditions in order to be able to predict if there might be any effects from the project. And then we have, as we sort of reach the end of the activities, the modeling phase. And then this is where everything is put together. You build these models to help predict where and like the distribution of these species, um, quantitatively as well as qualitatively, where and how many, um, and then look at those locations relative to the project footprint and the various study areas. And this is the sort of where we put everything together, and then we identify what we think will be the potential impacts to species at risk as part of the environmental assessment or impact assessment. So that's basically the study plan for species at risk, and we hope that sort of gives you a good picture as the how how things how things work in terms of the activities associated with species at risk during the project. So that wraps up today's discussion of the Species at Risk study plan, and we hope it was helpful and encourages you to join us again next week. Don't forget to keep in touch with our project team members via the contact information available on our website, northernroadlink.ca. Miigwech, and make sure to look out for project updates on social media and our website.